Alright guys, let's continue reading 289. The Godfather. Remember, they're having a meeting of all the 5 families, including a bunch of other families that came from other places, just to be mediators, right? And so the Don just spoke, and he's saying he's not going to take no retaliation, but he's also not going to do business with them until they guarantee that Michael can come back from Sicily, where he's hiding pretty much. And then now, one of the other 5 families that they were at war with spoke up and said, let's not pretend that the reason why Salazzo and the Tattaglias tried to take you out was because it was all business, and let's not pretend that your influence and the power you have over the politicians are the reason why they asked for your help. And without your help from the politicians, without your influence over these politicians, we're not gonna be able to slang drugs, because there's some sort of a moral principle right here, some sort of compromise. It's gonna have to be. Some compromise, some sort of give and take. So we're gonna see: is the Don gonna go into drugs? Are they gonna continue warring? What's gonna happen? You know. I mean, we're already almost 300 pages in, and I mean, is there still going to be a war continuing? You know. So Don Corleone, he's responding. He's responding to Barzini, who just spoke about what I just said about. Well, wait a minute, Don. Like you're saying, no. Well, you know why Salazzo tried to take you out, you know, because he first came to you with the business proposal and you refused. So Don Corleone responds. So Don Corleone finally spoke to answer. My friends, he said, I didn't refuse out of spite. You all know me. When have I ever refused an accommodation? That's simply not in my nature, but I had to refuse this time. Why? Because I think this drug business will destroy us in the years to come. There was too much strong feeling about such traffic in this country. It's not like whiskey or gambling or even women, which most people want and is forbidden them by the pesanovante of the church and the government. But drugs are dangerous for everyone connected with them. It could jeopardize all of the business, and let me say I'm flattered by the belief that I am so powerful with the judges and law officials. I wish it were true. I do have some influence, but many of the people who respect my counsel might lose this respect if drugs become involved in our relationship. They are afraid to be involved in such business, and they have strong feelings about it. Even policemen who help us in gambling and other things will refuse to help us in drugs. So to ask me to perform a service in these matters is to ask me to do a disservice to myself, but I'm willing to do even that if all of you think it proper in order to adjust other matters. When Don Corleone had finished speaking, the room became much more relaxed, with more whisperings and crosstalk. He had conceded the important point. He would offer his protection to any organized business venture in drugs. He wasn't in effect agreeing almost entirely to Salazzo's original proposal, and that proposal was endorsed by the national group gathered here. It was understood that he would never participate in the operational phase, nor would he invest his money. He would merely use his protective influence with the legal apparatus. But this was a formidable concession, meaning like a powerful, like kind of surrender in a sense. The Don of Los Angeles, Frank Falcone, spoke to answer. There's no way of stopping our people from going into that business. They go in on their own and they get in trouble. There's too much money in it to resist. So it's more dangerous if we don't go in. At least if we control it, we can cover it. We can cover it better, organize it better, make sure it causes less trouble. Being in it is not so bad. There has to be control. There has to be protection. There has to be organization. We can't have everybody running around doing just what they please like a bunch of anarchists. The Don of Detroit, more friendly to Corleone than any of the others, also now spoke against his friend's position in the interest of reasonableness. I don't believe in drugs, he said. For years I paid my people extra so they wouldn't do that kind of business. But it didn't matter. It didn't help. Somebody comes to them and says, I have powders. If you put up the $4,000 investment, we can make $50,000 distributing. Who can resist such a profit? And they are so busy with their little side business, they neglect the work I pay them to do. There's more money in drugs. It's getting bigger all the time. There's no way to stop it, so we have to control the business and keep it respectable. I don't want any of it near schools. I don't want any of it sold to children. This is an infamita. In my city, I would try to keep the traffic in the dark people, the colored. They are the best customers, the least troublesome, and they are animals anyway. They have no respect for their wives or their families or for themselves. Let them lose their souls with drugs, but something has to be done. We just can't let people do as they please and make trouble for everyone. I mean, I don't have to explain. That's pretty fucked up. So this speech of the Detroit Don was received with loud murmurs of approval. He had hit the nail on the head. He couldn't even pay people to stay out of the drug traffic. As for his remarks about children, that was his well-known sensibility, his tender-heartedness speaking. After all, who would sell drugs to children? Where would children get the money? As for his remarks about the coloreds, that was not even heard. The Negroes were considered of absolutely no account, of no force whatsoever. That they had allowed society to grind them into dust proved them of no account, and his mentioning them in any way proved that the Don of Detroit had a mind that always wavered toward irrelevancies. It's fucked up to say, but there might be some truth in that. All the Dons spoke, all of them deplored the traffic in drugs as a bad thing that would cause trouble, but agreed there was no way to control it. There was simply too much money to be made in the business. Therefore, it followed that there would be men who would dare anything to dabble in it. That was human nature. Like, we can't stop it. We might as well control it, you know? It's going to happen anyway. And with our control, it's going to be in control, not uncontrollable. It was finally agreed drug traffic would be permitted and Don Corleone must give it some legal protection in the East. It was understood that the Barzini and Tattaglia families would do most of the large-scale operations. With this out of the way, the conference was able to move on to other matters of a wider interest. There were many complex problems to be solved. It was agreed that Las Vegas and Miami were to be open cities where any of the families could operate. They all recognized that these were the cities of the future. It was also agreed that no violence would be permitted in these cities and that petty criminals of all types were to be discouraged. It was agreed that in momentous affairs, in executions that were necessary but might cause too much of a public outcry, the execution must be approved by this council. It was agreed that button men and other soldiers were to be restrained from violent crimes and acts of vengeance against each other on personal matters. It was agreed that families would do each other services when requested, such as providing executioners, technical assistance in pursuing certain courses of action, such as bribing jurors, which in some instances could be vital. These discussions, informal, colloquial, and on a high level, took time and were broken by lunch and drinks from the buffet bar. Finally, Don Barzini sought to bring the meeting to an end. That's the whole matter, then, he said. We have the peace, and let me pay my respects to Don Corleone, who we all have known over the years as a man of his word. If there are any more differences, we can meet again. We need not become foolish again. On my part, the road is new and fresh. I'm glad this is all settled. Only Philip Tattaglia was a little worried still. The murder of Santino Corleone made him the most vulnerable person in this group if war broke out again. He spoke at length for the first time. I've agreed to everything here. I'm willing to forget my own misfortune, but I would like to hear some strict assurances from Corleone. Will he attempt any individual vengeance? When time goes by and his position, perhaps, becomes stronger, will he forget that we have sworn our friendship? How am I to know that in 3 or 4 years he won't feel that he's been ill-served, forced against his will to this agreement, and so free to break it? Will we have to guard against each other all the time, or can we truly go in peace with peace of mind? Would Corleone give us all his assurances as I now give mine? Crazy, because he killed his fucking son. It was then that Don Corleone gave the speech that would be long remembered, and that reaffirmed his position as the most far-seeing statesman among them, so full of common sense, so direct from the heart and to the heart of the matter. In it, he coined a phrase that was to become as famous in its way as Churchill's Iron Curtain, though not public knowledge until more than 10 years later. For the first time he stood up to address the council. He was short and a little thin from his illness. Perhaps his 60 years showed a bit more, but there was no question that he had regained all his former strength and had all his wits. What manner of men are we then if we do not have our reason, he said. We are all no better than beasts in a jungle if that were the case. But we have reason. We can reason with each other and we can reason with ourselves. To what purpose would I start all these troubles again? The violence and the turmoil. My son is dead, and that is a misfortune, and I must bear it, not make the innocent world around me suffer with me. And so I say, I give my honor that I will never seek vengeance. I will never seek knowledge of the deeds that have been done in the past. I will leave here with a pure heart. Let me say that we must always look to our interests. We are all men who have refused to be fools, who have refused to be puppets, dancing on a string pulled by the men on high. We have been fortunate here in this country. Already most of our children have found a better life. Some of you have sons who are professors, scientists, musicians, and you are fortunate. Perhaps your grandchildren will become the new Pezzanovanti. None of us here want to see our children follow in our footsteps. It's too hard a life. They can be as others, their position and security won by our courage. I have grandchildren now, and I hope their children may someday, who knows, be a governor or president. Nothing's impossible here in America, but we have to progress with the times. The time is past for guns and killings and massacres. We have to be cunning like the business people. There's more money in it, and it's better for our children and our grandchildren. It's a trip because you don't really realize, like, Sonny left behind some kids, you know. But then you also think, like, the Don being so smart, supposedly, that, like one kid, I know Michael went to the war. One of his kids fucking in shock, the middle kid, because he saw what happened to his dad. More kind of like cowardice in a sense, you know. He let it affect his mind. And then Sonny was just a crazy murderer. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you really respect that? I don't know. So it's kind of crazy. We have to be cunning like the business people. There's more money in it. It's better for our children. So what manner of men are we if we do not have our reason? We're no better than beasts if that were the case, but we have reason. We can reason with each other, and we can reason with ourselves. Nice. We must always look to our interests. We are all men who have refused to be fools, who have refused to be puppets dancing on a string pulled by the men on high. Anyway, as for our own deeds, we are not responsible to the 90 calibers, the peasant who take it upon themselves to decide what we shall do with our lives, who declare wars they wish us to fight and to protect what they own. Talking about the government. Who is to say we should obey the laws they make for their own interest and to our hurt, you know, to our ill benefit? And who are they then to meddle when we look after our own interests? Sona cosa nostra, Don Corleone said. These are our own affairs. So these are our own affairs. We will manage our world for ourselves because it is our world, Cosa Nostra. And so we have to stick together to guard against outside meddlers. Otherwise, they will put the ring in our nose as they have put the ring in the nose of all the millions of Neapolitans and other Italians in this country. For this reason, I forego my vengeance for my dead son. For the common good, I swear now that as long as I am responsible for the actions of my family, there will not be one finger lifted against any man here without just cause and utmost provocation. Like without a really serious issue to bring vengeance, you know. I'm willing to sacrifice my commercial interests for the common good. This is my word. This is my honor. There are those of you here who know I have never betrayed either. But I have a selfish interest. My youngest son had to flee, accused of Salazzo's murder and that of a police captain. I must now make arrangements so that he can come home with safety, cleared of all those false charges. That is my affair, and I will make those arrangements. I must find the real culprits, perhaps. Perhaps I must convince the authorities of his innocence. Perhaps the witnesses and informants will recant their lies. But again, I say that this is my affair, and I believe I will be able to bring my son home. But let me say this, I am a superstitious man, a ridiculous failing, but I must confess it here. And so if some unlucky accident should befall my youngest son, if some police officer should accidentally shoot him, if he should hang himself in his cell, if no witnesses appear to testify to his guilt, my superstition will make me feel that it was the result of the ill will still borne me by some people here. Let me go further. If my son is struck by a bolt of lightning, I will blame some of the people here. If his plane should fall into the sea or his ship sink beneath the waves of the ocean, if he should catch a mortal fever, if his automobile should be struck by a train, such is my superstition that I will blame the ill will felt by people here. Gentlemen, that ill will, that bad luck, I can never forgive. But aside from that, let me swear by the souls of my grandchildren that I will never break the peace we have made. After all, are we or are we not better men than those Pezzonovanti who have killed countless millions of men in our lifetimes? So Pezzonovanti, let's go with that real quick. Let's take a little break. What's a Pezzonovanti? Obviously talking about the government, but he's talking about like they're European too, you know, they're from Italy. Is he talking about English? The English? So define the Pezzonovanti. Define Pezzonovanti. Oh, big shot. So Pezzonovanti is a Sicilian term that means big shot or 95 caliber. It's often used in a pejorative way to refer to people who have power and social capital in legitimate society, such as lawyers, doctors, professors, politicians, and church leaders. The term originated in World War II when Italians used it to refer to 90mm artillery. It became popular after appearing in The Godfather. So with this, Don Corleone stepped from his place and went down the table to where Don Philip Tattaglia was sitting. Tattaglia rose to greet him, and the two men embraced, kissing each other's cheeks. The other dons in the room applauded and rose to shake hands with everybody in sight and to congratulate Don Corleone and Don Tattaglia on their new friendship. It was not perhaps the warmest friendship in the world. They would not send each other Christmas gift greetings, but they would not murder each other. That was friendship enough in this world, all that was needed. It's hilarious, right? Since his son Freddie was under the protection of the Molinari family in the West, Don Corleone lingered with the San Francisco Don after the meeting to thank him. Molinari said enough for Don Corleone to gather that Freddie had found his niche out there, was happy, and had become something of a ladies' man. He had a genius for running a hotel, it seemed. Don Corleone shook his head in wonder, as many fathers do when told of undreamed of talents in their children. Wasn't it true that sometimes the greatest misfortunes brought unforeseen rewards? They both agreed that this was so. Meanwhile, Corleone made it clear to the San Francisco Don that he was in his debt for the great service done in protecting Freddie. He let it be known that his influence would be exerted so that the important racing wires would always be available to his people, no matter what changes occurred in the power structure in the years to come. An important guarantee, since the struggle over this facility was a constant open wound, complicated by the fact that the Chicago people had their heavy hand in it. But Don Corleone was not without influence, even in that land of barbarians, and so his promise was a gift of gold. So the people in Chicago are, the Capone and those guys, so they call them the barbarians. It was evening before Don Corleone, Tom Hagen, and the bodyguard chauffeur, who happened to be Rocco Lampone, arrived at the mall in Long Beach. When they went into the house, the Don said to Hagen, "Our driver, that man Lampone, keep an eye on him. He's a fellow worth something better than I think." Hagen wondered at this remark. Lampone had not said a word all day, had not even glanced at the two men in the back seat. He had opened the door for the Don. The car had been in front of the bank when they emerged. He had done everything correctly, but no more than any well-trained chauffeur might do. Evidently, the Don's eye had seen something he had not seen. The Don dismissed Hagen and told him to come back to the house after supper, but to take his time and rest a little, since they would put in a long night of discussion. So, to rest. He also told Hagen to have Clemenza and Tessio present. They should come at 10 p.m., not before. Hagen was to brief Clemenza and Tessio on what happened at the meeting that afternoon. At 10, the Don was waiting for the three men in his office, the corner room of the house with its law library and special phone. There was a tray with whiskey bottles, ice, and soda water. The Don gave his instructions. "We made the peace this afternoon," he said. "I gave my word and my honor that should be enough for all of you. I gave my word and my honor, and that should be enough for all of you. But our friends are not so trustworthy, so let's all be on our guard still. We don't want any more nasty little surprises." Then Don turned to Hagen. "You've let the Bochichicho hostages go." Hagen nodded. "I called Clemenza as soon as I got home." Corleone turned to the massive Clemenza. The Capo regime nodded. "I released them. Tell me, Godfather, is it possible for a Sicilian to be as dumb as the Bochichios pretend to be?" Don Corleone smiled a little. "They are clever enough to make a good living. Why is it so necessary to be more clever than that? It's not the Bochichichos who cause the troubles of this world, but it's true, they haven't got the Sicilian head." They were all in a relaxed mood now that the war was over. Don Corleone himself mixed drinks and brought one to each man. The Don sipped his carefully and lit up a cigar. "I want nothing set forth to discover what happened to Sonny. That's done with and to be forgotten. I want all cooperations with the other families, even if they become a little greedy and we don't get our proper share in things. I want nothing to break this peace, no matter what the provocation, until we found a way to bring Michael home. And I want that to be the first thing on your minds. Remember this, when he comes back, he must come back in absolute safety. I don't mean from the Tattaglias or the Barzinis. What I'm concerned about are the police. Sure, we can get rid of the real evidence against him. That waiter won't testify, nor that spectator or gunman or whatever he was. The real evidence is the least of our worries, since we know about it. What we have to worry about is the police framing false evidence because their informers have assured them that Michael Corleone is the man who killed their captain. Very well, we have to demand that the five families do everything in their power to correct this belief of the police. All their informers who work with the police must come up with new stories. I think after my speech this afternoon, they will understand it is to their interest to do so. But that's not enough. We have to come up with something special so Michael will never have to worry about that again. Otherwise, there's no point in him coming back to this country. So let's all think about that. That's the most important matter. Now, any man should be allowed one foolishness in his life. I have had mine. I want all the land around the mall bought, the houses bought. I don't want any man able to look out his window into my garden, even if it's a mile away. I want a fence around the mall, and I want the mall to be on full protection all the time. I want a gate in that fence. In short, I wish now to live in a fortress. Let me say to you now that I will never go into the city to work again. I will be semi-retired. I feel an urge to work in the garden, to make a little wine when the grapes are in season. I want to live in my house. The only time I'll leave is to go on a little vacation or to see someone on important business, and then I want all precautions taken. Now don't take this amiss. I'm not preparing anything. I'm being prudent. I've always been a prudent man. There was nothing I find so little to my taste as carelessness in life. Women and children can afford to be careless. Men cannot. Be leisurely in all these things. No frantic preparations to alarm our friends. It can be done in such a way as to seem natural. Some wisdom right there. Women and children can afford to be careless. Men cannot. Be leisurely in all these things. Like everything, all the orders he's given them, be leisurely in all these things. No frantic preparations to alarm our friends. It can be done in such a way as to seem natural. Now I'm going to leave things more and more up to each of you three. I want the Santino regime disbanded and the men placed in your regimes. That should reassure our friends and show that I mean peace. Tom, I want you to put together a group of men who will go to Las Vegas and give me a full report on what is going on out there. Tell me about Fredo. What is really happening out there? I hear I wouldn't recognize my own son. It seems he's a cook now, that he amuses himself with young girls more than a grown man should. Well, he was always too serious when he was young, and he was never the man for family business. But let's find out what really can be done out there. Hagen said quietly, should we send your son-in-law? After all, Carlo is a native of Nevada. He knows his way around. Don Corleone shook his head. No, my wife is lonely here without any of her children. I want Costanza and her husband moved into one of the houses on the mall. I want Carlo given a responsible job. Maybe I've been too harsh on him. And he says, so Don Corleone made a grimace. I'm short of sons. Take him out of the gambling and put him in with the unions where he can do some paperwork and a lot of talking. He's a good talker. There was the tiniest note of contempt in the Don's voice. Hagen nodded. Okay, Clemenza and I will go over all the people and put together a group to do the Vegas job. Do you want me to call Freddie home for a few days? So Clemenza and I will go over all the people. Hey, that's what Hagen said. So the Don shook his head. He said cruelly, like, what for? Like, what should Freddie come for? What for? My wife can still cook our meals. Let him stay out there. The three men shifted uneasily in their seats. They had not realized Freddie was in such severe disfavor with his father, and they suspected it must be because of something they did not know. Don Corleone sighed. I hope to grow some good green peppers and tomatoes in the garden this year, more than we can eat. I'll make you presents of them. I want a little peace, a little quiet and tranquility for my old age. Well, that's all. Have another drink if you like. It was a dismissal. The men rose. Hagen accompanied Clemenza and Tessio to their cars and arranged meetings with them to thrash out the operational details that would accomplish the stated desires of their Don. Then he went back into the house where he knew Don Corleone would be waiting for him. The Don had taken off his jacket and tie and was lying down on the couch. His stern face was relaxed into lines of fatigue. He waved Hagen into a chair and said, Well, consigliere, do you disapprove of any of my deeds today? Hagen took his time answering. No, he said, but I don't find it consistent nor true to your nature. You say you don't want to find out how Santino was killed or want vengeance for it. I don't believe that. You gave your word for peace, and so you'll keep the peace, but I can't believe you will give your enemies a victory they seem to have won today. You've constructed a magnificent riddle that I can't solve, so how can I approve or disapprove? That's a pretty wise response. A look of content came over the Don's face. Well, you know me better than anyone else, even though you're not a Sicilian. I made you one. Everything you say is true, but there's a solution, and you'll comprehend it before it spins out to the end. You agree everyone has to take my word, and I'll keep my word, and I want my orders obeyed exactly. But Tom, the most important thing is we have to get Michael home as soon as possible. Make that first in your mind and in your work. Explore all the legal alleys. I don't care how much money you have to spend. It has to be foolproof when he comes home. Consult the best lawyers on criminal law. I'll give you the names of some judges who will give you a private audience. Until that time, we have to guard against all treacheries. Hagen said, like you, I'm not worried so much about the real evidence as the evidence they will manufacture. Also, some police friend may kill Michael after he's arrested. They may kill him in his cell or have one of the prisoners do it. As I see it, we can't even afford to have him arrested or accused. Don Corleone sighed. I know, that's the difficulty. But we can't take too long. There are troubles in Sicily. The young fellows over there don't listen to their elders anymore, and a lot of the men deported from America are just too much for the old-fashioned Dons to handle. Michael could get caught in between. I've taken some precautions against that, and he's still got a good cover, but that cover won't last forever. So he said So the people being deported from America are just too much for the old-fashioned Dons to handle. Michael could get caught in between. I've taken some precautions against that, and he's still got a good cover, but that cover won't last forever. That's one of the reasons I had to make the peace. Barzini has friends in Sicily, and they were beginning to sniff Michael's trail. That gives you one of the answers to your riddle. I had to make the peace to ensure my son's safety. There was nothing else to do. Hagen didn't bother asking the Don how he had gotten this information. He was not even surprised, and it was true that this solved part of the riddle. When I meet with Tattaglia's people to firm up the details, should I insist that all his drug middlemen be clean? The judges will be a little skittish about giving light sentences to a man with a record. Don Corleone shrugged. They should be smart enough to figure that out themselves. Mention it, don't insist. We'll do our best, but if they use a real snowbird and he gets caught, we won't lift a finger. We'll just tell them nothing can be done. But Barzini is a man who will know that without being told. You notice how he never committed himself in this affair. One might never have known he was in any way concerned. That is a man who doesn't get caught on the losing side. But Barzini is a man who will never know that without being told. You notice how he never committed himself in this affair. Hagen was startled. You mean he was behind Salazzo and Tattaglia all the time? Don Corleone sighed. Tattaglia is a pimp. He can never have outfought Santino. That's why I don't have to know about what happened. It's enough to know that Barzini had a hand in it. Hagen let this sink in. The Don was giving him clues, but there was something very important left out. Hagen knew what it was, but he knew it was not his place to ask. He said goodnight and turned to go. The Don had a last word for him. Remember, use all your wits for a plan to bring Michael home, the Don said. And one other thing, a list of all the telephone calls. And one other thing, arrange with the telephone man so that every month I get a list of all the telephone calls made and received by Clemenza and Tessio. I suspect them of nothing. I would swear they would never betray me, but there's no harm in knowing any little thing that may help us before the event. Hagen nodded and went on. He wondered if the Don was keeping a check on him also in some way, and then was ashamed of his suspicion. But now he was sure that in the subtle and complex mind of the Godfather, a far-ranging plan of action was being initiated that made the day's happenings no more than a tactical retreat. And there was that one dark fact that no one mentioned, that he himself had not dared to ask, that Don Corleone ignored. And there was that one dark fact that no one mentioned, that he himself had not dared to ask, that Don Corleone ignored, all pointed to a day of reckoning in the future. Either I'm fucking stupid, I'm not sure. What is that one dark fact that no one mentioned? The one dark fact that no one mentioned. I don't know. I'm sure it'll be revealed, and I'm sure Mario Puzo will come around to it. I've never seen the movie, and I'm glad I don't know. I have no clue. I can't even put a finger on it. But yeah. He killed his fucking son, So I don't trust Barzini. I don't even trust Barzini at all. Peace, y'all.